Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the festival director and program director of Something Wicked Film Festival and Events. Welcome to the show today. We are doing a good film and a great film that I like that may border on being a horror film and maybe not. A lot of people consider this a superhero movie, whereas some people, because of the director, consider it a horror film. We're gonna let you decide as you listen to me and my special guest Thomas Tinnerello talk about the amazing Sam Raimi directed Darkman. So that's the movie we're gonna do today. Darkman, like I said, just to give you all a little heads up. For me, Darkman was always a superhero movie because I was a fucking comic book geek growing up. So I always considered Darkman like the craziest comic book movie that I never got until that came out. Like, when you're reading this stuff as a kid, you're thinking Batman, Superman, bam, let's see a movie about that. But that's not what I got. What I got was Darkman, and it was a movie that I saw way more times than I probably should have. How about you, Thomas? Thank you for joining us on the show. Tell me a little bit about your experiences watching Darkman.
Oh, I'm not going to tell you a little bit. I'll probably tell you a lot of it. Well, thank you for having me on the show again. It's been a long time coming for this movie, and I am here for it. So, Darkman. I think I've been trying to rack my brain trying to figure out when was the first time that I saw this, and I cannot remember a single incident, but I can remember it's almost like it was always there. I'd always seen it. But I do remember, now that I think about it, that I remember previously I told you about how my mom would take like random triple features and put them together on VHSs that she pirated off of HBO and such. Well, this was one of those. In fact, I'm pretty sure Darkman was on a triple feature with Monster Squad and something else. Maybe it might have been The Last Unicorn. I'm not sure.
Oh my God.
That's a triple feature nobody wanted. But I don't think, but I'm pretty sure I never rented it because I do not have that tactile memory of the VHS cover in my hand with that poster, which, by the way, is one of the most iconic posters in movie history.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that Shout Factory reproduced it for the reversible cover on the Blu-ray that I own, because my goodness, if y'all at home, Google it if you're not driving, because it's epic and boss. I'm probably gonna have to get myself a big version of it to hang in my closet. Not hang in my closet, but outside my closet. Anyway, the other thing I remember about my first experience of seeing this movie, which what's funny is, like, I was definitely too young to see it, but at the same time, it's one of those quote unquote R-rated movies that is, I think if released today, it probably would get a PG-13. It's very like soft R. There's like one F-bomb. There's no nudity. There's no like graphic, sexual or anything. The violence isn't even that graphic, to be honest. There's no gore in it. It's so wildly over the top and exaggerated. Because that's the other big thing I remember is when I was young, I don't remember. Oh, here's what sparked it. This had to have been 1990 or 91 when I had this conversation with my parents. I remember my mom. We were watching a movie. I don't even remember what it was, but they used the word exaggerated, and I did not know what the word exaggerated meant. Like see if she could have said Dick Tracy, but no. He said the example she used was twofold. She said, kind of like the Dolph Lundgren Punisher. The violence in that is exaggerated. It's more than what it would be in real life. The other example she used was Darkman. He's like, his face is like burned in such a way that's like exaggerated. It's over. It's more than what would realistically be there. Although I would, if anybody's out there who's listening is a medical doctor and has seen his face burned at the end of the movie, write in and tell us if that is in fact an accurate depiction of what a burn victim in that particular instance really does look like. But anyway, this movie was seen along with was to my parents apparently, along with the Dolph Lundgren Punisher, was exactly the standard of what an exaggerated thing is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're right in a sense, because like this movie is kind of set in a world of just arch everything almost. I mean, the explosions can happen and you can survive it. Doctors routinely play, crazy medical experiments with on John Does they just find in the middle of the street. Corporate sleazeballs can use giant nail guns that shoot big bolts through the air like they're bullets, which is not at all how they work. Uh, you know, gangsters with one wooden leg, can take off their leg, and it's an Uzi that fires 1,000,000 bullets. So yeah, I would say this is definitely an exaggerated and over the top, a comic book ish movie, even though it's not particularly based on any one comic book.
No, and that's the thing about the movie is before the craze of comic books came out with Batman, which was just released a year before, this movie was like that with a comic book movie before anyone thought about comic book movies being profitable again. Because with Tim Burton's Batman, that was not a film designed to make any money. No one at the time that was made, it was a big, huge fucking gamble. There was no trends that had been set. This coming out a year later, it's R-rated. There is still no excuse me. There are still no trends being set by comic book movies because no one is banking on comic book movies being huge. Of course, we all know now Batman was bigger than anyone expected. It became a huge fucking hit. And then, of course, a year later, we come with Darkman, which is a really dark comic book movie, which feels more like The Shadow to me. And it feels like you said, the humor, the type of humor, and especially the music feels like a Dick Tracy more so than a regular comic book movie. The Shadow and Dick Tracy, those types are these darker characters that just happen to have come out from the comic book world. So,
well, that's the thing is like I don't think that we can not talk about this and not also talk about The Shadow with Alec Baldwin, which incidentally exists probably because of this movie.
Oh yeah.
And also this movie exists because of that movie. They're interconnected. Incidentally, the Alec Baldwin The Shadow was the very first movie I ever saw by myself in a theater, because it was PG-13 and I wanted to see it, and I just turned 13. So mom let me watch The Shadow by myself and dropped me off at AMC Theater. And so that movie was the first movie I ever watched by myself in a movie theater. So it will always be slightly special because of that. But it's special for Sam Raimi because Sam Raimi had always wanted to do a version of The Shadow. And apparently he had a pitch package together and everything with his, co-writer Scott Spiegel, and did work on Evil Dead 2. And this must have been right around before he went and did Crime Wave with the Coens, because he didn't have that bomb in his rear view. But he put forth the idea of The Shadow to the studios, and if it looked anything like Darkman, I could see why they probably said, no.
Yeah.
So he said, well, screw you guys, I'm going home. So he did Crime Wave, and then to recover from Crime Wave, he did Evil Dead 2. And then eventually, he's just like, the studio's like, so you still have anything? He's like, I have my own version of The Shadow, call it Darkman. And like, okay, yeah, let's do that, because you made a lot of money with Evil Dead 2. So yeah. So that's kind of like a little lesson for all y'all out there. If you have screenwriters, if you have an IP that you don't own, but you have a really great, strong take on it, just go ahead and change it a little bit. Change it so much to the point where it's something original. I mean, just recently it's been done this way, like Abigail, the new vampire movie from Radio Silence that just came out this weekend. that was supposed to be an adaptation of Dracula's Daughter,
Mhm.
the movie, and they decided to change it just enough to make it something original, and the studio let them. So God bless Universal for that, because we need more original horror IP these days, and Radio Silence has done it. And from what I understand, Abigail is a blast. So let's go out there and check it out if you can, guys.
So
But
go
so
ahead.
like he does so, and it's funny too. Like Universal liked this pitch enough. They're like, okay, we'll give you 50 million, something like that, and bam. So now I know this might. Wait a minute.
What?
I got something. Oh yeah. I just realized, Kevin, real quickly that like we keep forgetting we throw out these references, and there's babies out there who probably don't even know who the heck the Shadow is.
Yeah, well, that's
So
the whole thing is the Shadow comes out in 94, I believe, and that is after this movie and Batman and even Dick Tracy, which came out the same year as Darkman, all come out, and these are all highly stylized movies. Like these aren't your typical superhero movies. These aren't like what you saw with the original Superman movies. These are highly stylized movies. Tim Burton,
oh yeah.
highly stylized. It was, and of course, Warren Beatty directed Dick Tracy, which is highly stylized, and this is, and like you said, realistic. Um,
Yeah. Like
uh,
I think actually what I meant to say was is like how the Shadow is it kind of comes from the pulp
yeah,
mystery comic sort of mystery novel tradition,
mhm.
film noir, which of course is the respectable cousin of horror. It was kind of the domain of the Shadow in the sense that actually the show started off on the radio as kind of like a horror anthology, and the Shadow was the host. But everyone was so curious about who this Shadow is that they wanted a show about him. So they created that character, and he was basically just like a guy with a hat and a coat, and he ran around beating up bad guys. And in later versions, he had powers like he could turn himself into a shadow and all that. Later on, though, you get um, a character from Marvel Comics. No, not Marvel, DC, called the Unknown Soldier,
Mhm.
who I could swear Sam Raimi had to have taken something from him, because the Unknown Soldier is like a soldier who got burned so bad that he has no identity anymore. So he's got bandages wrapped around his head all the time. Sound familiar? And he can assume the identity of anybody. Sound familiar? And but he can't keep his disguise on forever because his skin starts to itch and he just can't stand it anymore. So he rips off the mask and oh, his cover is blown. So in this movie, he's got a medical reason why he can't keep the mask on, because in the light, the mask only lasts about an hour and a half, and
Mhm.
then it melts. So sound familiar? Uh, but I think I think in the end, what this kind of becomes, though, for me, it sort of becomes my favorite version of Phantom of the Opera.
Yep, I can see that.
About it, he is like the Phantom, a disfigured genius who's out for revenge, a master of disguise, and he's got a cool underground lair. Of course, in this case, he's got the biggest, frickin'
Back.
abandoned warehouse in the entire state of California. Uh, but yeah, pretty much, yeah. I feel like every time I try to make some kind of version of Phantom of the Opera, I take a big long look at it and go, wait a minute, this is just Darkman. This is really just Darkman over again.
Yeah,
But yeah,
and no, I was like to say, the great thing about Darkman is, and you mentioned something interesting is, of course, his mask only lasts for 90 minutes, and that's like that's the big thing about the question that the character has at the very beginning of the film, but he never actually solves that problem by the end of the film. You realize
no,
it's his dilemma from the very beginning, and he never solves it. But that adds a sense of suspense to the film, because you never know when his time in the sunlight is going to end. And it leads to some very interesting set pieces throughout the entire film.
oh yeah. I feel like though, like that whole, hmm, I feel like look, watching it again recently, I realized, and having learned what I've learned about screenwriting, it almost like makes me wonder how this movie worked at all, because the scripts is kind of rough. Because there's things that he does that I think a modern screenwriter would never be able to get away with. Um, Not the least of which is the fact that again he sets up the whole what is the mystery of the dark? Why does the artificial skin I'm creating stay together in the dark? He never solves that mystery. A big studio making that today, they'd be like, you gotta solve that at the end of the movie somehow. His name is Darkman. He works in the dark. I mean, come on, you gotta do something. Sam Raimi's like, nah, I'm just gonna make this cool, zoom. That's what I'm caring about. But like also like the thing about their, and we're gonna jump ahead a little bit, but like there's something about his relationship with Frances McDormand's character. By the way, it's amazing fluke of casting that she got cast as the lead in this movie, because at the time Frances McDormand was not a huge star. She had not done Fargo yet. The only reason I think she even got this movie, and I think her interview on the disc bears this out, is because at the time she was married to, and I think she still is, married to one of the Coen brothers. Who, those who don't know, the Coen brothers and Sam Raimi and company are inextricably linked together. They have done work on each other's movies ever since Evil Dead. Joel Coen is in fact the editor of the first Evil Dead movie, and they definitely did a pass on the script to Darkman, and Sam has done passes on Fargo and some other things, so it's all uncredited. But like, there's things in this like that I think, oh, what is it? Oh yeah, so they're sitting there at the beginning of this movie. You meet Liam Neeson, who is Dr. Peyton Westlake, who also not a big star. This was his first movie. This is like his first leading role. Up until then, he was just kind of like man over Mel Gibson's left shoulder in The Bounty, or horny ghost in High Spirits with Daryl Hannah. Well, horny and farty ghost. But like, he was having trouble getting lead roles, and somehow, again, Sam just realized, hey, we got some bigger stars here, but no, I want that big tall Irish guy. Let's get him. So one of the first things you see him is he's sitting there in a slideshow, like watching slides of their younger life with his fiance girlfriend. That's another.
Remember, he asked her in the movie before he has his accident.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so there's that tension there. But we know that part. We know their status as a couple. We know they're happy, but he wants to get married, because we know they're happy because they're having fun together, and they seem like they're not fighting about his research or anything. And she's some kind of corporate lawyer. We're not entirely certain exactly what she does. But what we don't get is why the heck why he's so obsessed with building artificial skin. There's no motivation for his character to be building this stuff. I think if this movie were made today, there would have been a note saying you got to put that in, and maybe during that slideshow thing, they would have seen just an image of maybe his mother or his younger brother who got in a bad car accident and got burned. So that would have been something. But no, we got none of that. There's no explanation. He's just interested in building artificial skin, and that's his thing.
You make a great point there. You're absolutely right. There is no reasoning for that. Like, there is no reasoning for why he never solves the problem by the end of the movie. And you're right. Yeah, you're right. A modern day studio guy would probably say, "Yeah, we gotta fix these issues here. These are plot holes." And for the audience, they're not really plot holes. To be honest with you, it doesn't take away or add anything to the film itself to know the answer to these questions at all. It just opens the possibilities for a sequel.
Yeah, well, they did have two of those straight to video, but we'll get to that. They should have had more, because there's so many other places this character could explore. But yeah, let's go back a little bit, and I just want to say, as I rewatch this again, I'm like, how lovely is Frances McDormand in this movie? Even though she's like a nothing part, she is still like really great in it, I think. Don't
Yeah,
you agree? I know, like, I know who she was. I knew only who she was after Fargo, and
yeah.
even after I took my first trip to LA in '99, I got to meet her on the set of Almost Famous. She seems super cool, and she seems pretty much the same on the supplementals to this movie. And apparently, according to her interview on there, she did not have a good time making this movie at all. There's not that many. You don't hear a lot of stories of actors clashing with Sam Raimi, but
Yeah.
this is the one, because apparently she and Sam did not get along very well. She did not like that there, I guess, wasn't very much for her character to do, and the only reason her character really even existed is apparently Sam listened to movie critics about them criticizing his female characters in his movies up until that point. Because if you watch Evil Dead, you watch Evil Dead 2, there's really not that many strong female characters in that. Most of them just kind of get raped by trees or possessed by demons or or murdered or it's so I guess he tried with this character to do something and it wasn't up to her standards, but nowadays she apparently has come to peace with Darkman and sees it as one of the best early opportunities she had, and in spite of all the difficulties, she does speak of it positively now.
Well,
So that's nice.
Darkman's one of those movies that became a cult film because when it originally came out, people had no expectations of it. It's a weird little superhero movie without actually being based on a comic book. Although, point of fact, Marvel did eventually do comic books based on Darkman, which was always kind of funny. But it was that rarity, like you said, that they had the Punisher movie coming out, and that was trying to be as much not like the Punisher as possible, to bury the fact that it's based on a comic book. And if you didn't know the Shadow or the Phantom or Dick Tracy were based on comic books, Dick Tracy is about the only one that really pulls out that comic book aesthetic out of all those movies. The rest of them, if you never knew that they were based on these old pulp comic books, you wouldn't have missed it. You wouldn't have missed it at all. So
Yeah, that's actually something that apparently Frances McDormand pushed back on with Sam during the productions because like she didn't understand the tone he was going for. Um, because and I guess it's kind of hard to explain that. Like he said one of the things that kind of boggled her was how like people in this movie just seem to be slightly invincible. And that's kind of until it's time for them to actually die. Because like I mean obviously Peyton Westlake should have been dead a million times over, but like even everybody else who gets like everybody is like a cartoon character. They
mhm.
get punched, they get drops, they get impaled, they get shot, and just like they just bounce back. They just bounce back. He's okay. He's okay until he gets run over by a truck, like poor Ted Raimi does. Because that's how you know it's a Sam Raimi movie if you see either Bruce Campbell or Ted Raimi. You're watching some Sam Raimi up in this mofo.
Yeah, but the way Ted Raimi dies is so much like a comic book and so like the tone of his Three Stooges love affair that you
Oh,
couldn't help but laugh.
oh yeah. I mean, it was still slightly disturbing to me because I don't know. I guess some little tiny part of me kind of felt sorry for Rick because I was also a little nerdy nerd. Um,
And he's the
but
first one that dies.
and he's the first one who dies. Exactly. Uh, I mean, for those of y'all who are unlucky enough to not see who haven't seen this masterpiece, um, we Ted is part of this cadre of criminals who gets sent. By the way, I think this is probably part of what the Coen brothers added to this movie is the whole corporate espionage plot because that sounds kind of Hudsucker Proxy-ish, I think.
You know what? You're absolutely right about that. It does.
Yeah, and it also doesn't make a lot of sense. Like a lot of some of the plots to their movies, it doesn't really make sense if you really kind of take 1,000-yard view of it. But when you're up in there, like this whole thing is apparently hinges on Frances McDormand is trying to, or Julie is trying to take down this evil Tony Stark character named Strack, who is building a new city, and he's in league with the mob. And the mob, of course, is represented by Larry Drake or Robert G. Durant, who is your Edward G. Robinson classic, villain gangster, whose one quirk is that he likes to cut people's fingers off with a cigarette lighter or with a cigar chomper, which is probably the single most sharpest cigar chomper in the history of man and God, because it can cut through bone. So anyway, but her whole plot to take this guy down is this memo, the Belsaris Memorandum, and we know what it is because she stains it with coffee early in the movie, and somehow the Strack is found out, so he sends Durant to go and get the memorandum, thinking that they're going to find Frances McDormand there and probably knock her around or maybe even kill her so that she's not a threat anymore. But no, it just happens she's not even there. But Peyton Westlake and his hapless Japanese scientist assistant are there. And so, of course, being good gangsters, they just, kill the people who are there and take the memo with them. But they decide to just shoot the poor lab assistant, but they decide to torture and electrocute and burn Peyton because why not? And that's how and of course, then they basically turn the whole place into a bomb and leave with some gas. And this cute little bird, which I had no idea what that thing even was, but it was called a dipping bird, and it's basically a form of it's a form of it's sort of like a perpetual motion machine, but it's not. But this little dipping bird sets the timer off and opens up the gas, and that's what blows him up. And somehow he survives and doesn't drown in a lake when he gets thrown. And that is how we got ourselves on this journey with Darkman, where he is burned almost all over his body. And the next time we see him, he's all wrapped up like a mummy in a hospital, which, by the way, that hospital scene is probably where we put all of our cameos in one thing. Because apparently, I put down everybody I see. John Landis is one of the guys.
Oh,
Ivan Raimi, who is Sam's older brother, who is a doctor. So he had some input in this medical stuff. So most of this is probably medically accurate. I'm pretty sure that not being able to feel pain doesn't turn you into super adrenaline man, but everything else I think is pretty good.
Yep, and of course the nurse is from American Werewolf in London. I can't remember her name.
The lovely Jenny Argutter.
Thank you. I couldn't remember her name to save my life. Oh, but yeah.
Yeah, so she violates all kinds of medical like HIPAA laws by using this poor random John Doe in her experiment on pain blocking, and just sticks him with a needle to prove her point. Yeah. And he can't even feel it. I'm like, like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
He's the worst doctor ever.
Yeah, I noticed that when I rewatched it. I was like, oh wait, that's Jenny Agutter from American Werewolf in London. Oh my god. Because I hadn't seen the movie in years before we watched it for our conversation. It's been a long time since I've seen Darkman. As much as I love the movie when I was growing up, I haven't really had a reason or a chance to watch it as an adult. So in the 90s, when they originally came out and the sequels came out, I probably saw Darkman 15, 20 times. But I hadn't. It's not like Evil Dead. It's not one of Sam Raimi's films I always went back and watched like every few years.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, you probably have seen, and this goes to the audience that well, you probably seen snippets of this movie more times than you know, because they did use little bits of flashes of this movie during the Spider-Man transformation in the first Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
Specifically during that first time where he's changing, you'll see So this is probably a good time to say that a lot of Sam's visual flair and surreal kind of weirdness in this movie happens in these glimpses, these flashes we get inside Darkman's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because the idea is that his brain doesn't have the stimulus of pain or pleasure that skin gets. He can't feel the wind on his face or what a table feels like. It's all gone. All those nerves are dead. So his brain has to feed on his emotions, and that's what makes him super rage. But also, it gives him these weird hallucinations where we see the inside of his brain synapse firing, and those segments of the inside of his brain, you see those, but crawling with CG spiders in the first Spider-Man movie.
Yep.
Apparently, you also see in the first Spider-Man movie a snippet of a close-up of an eye with spiders on it from The Beyond,
Oh.
because Raimi's a huge fan of Fulci's The Beyond as well, and the editor somehow got a bit of that. So you do see that, but like throughout this movie, Darkman, there's all these. Whenever he gets angry or whenever he gets emotional, the camera will maybe like super fast, jittery zoom in on his eyeball, and then
Yeah.
see all these weird things just coming out at you. And according to the behind the scenes stuff on the Blu-ray, there are tons of that stuff they shot that never even made into the movie because the studio was like, yeah, no. Like for instance, apparently during the carnival scene, which we'll get to in a bit, um, apparently Peyton has this weird hallucination, which you see a fraction of a second of his head through like a curtain, and it's on top of this little marionette body, and he's dancing around and being looking like a freaking maniac while he looks like a human puppet. So they shot that and a bunch of other really strange stuff that just never made it into the movie. So I
I'm not
guess
surprised.
yeah, I'm not surprised. I wish there was more of that because that's more Raimi. Somebody once said that probably the most Raimi big budget superhero movie is not this movie, and it's not any of the Spider-Man movies. It's probably Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, because that's the one where Marvel seemed to let him go as kind of nuts as he wanted to.
Which is surprising considering how tame he's become in between I think it's Darkman and everything with the gift and a simple plan and the films that he subsequently would do before he hit Spider-Man. It's kind of like Peter Jackson. He did all these crazy fucking movies, and then to prove that he wasn't fucking crazy, he did Heavenly Creatures to show that he can do a normal movie with a little flair of his craziness. And then of course he went off to do Lord of the Rings. I don't think if he had not have done Heavenly Creatures, I doubt they would have given him the chance to do Lord of the Rings. Because he had to, like Sam Raimi was trying to prove himself. He had to prove himself as well. So
Yeah, I feel like I was thinking this while I was watching the 25th anniversary Blu-ray of The Frighteners.
mm,
Listen, if you listen to the commentary of him on The Frighteners, it's very fascinating because he made it before while he was just about to do pre-production on Lord of the Rings. So, he's talking about all the things that he wanted to do in the horror genre if The Frighteners had been a success.
yeah,
And wow, if only The Frighteners was a big hit, his career would have been very different.
very different. I'm actually
Yeah.
glad that as much as I fucking love The Frighteners, and it is one of my favorite Michael J. Fox films ever. I've seen The Frighteners more than I've seen Back to the Future. I love The Frighteners. I'm actually glad it did not do well because then he had to retool his career trajectory. And of course, he went off to do the Lord of the Rings films, which I believe are brilliant. And of course, he did The Lovely Bones, which is also another great movie. I just think that I'm hoping he gets back into the groove and stops doing these documentaries because I'm a little
Yeah,
waiting for him to get back.
me too. I wish he would do, because what he said in the Frighteners commentary, he said that he wanted to do like a CGI splatter flick and like push the limits of what digital can do, but do it with gore.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would be received this nowadays because people seem to only want practical gore. But if Weta Digital is involved, maybe they'll give them a pass. So, but I want to talk about how we at the top of this thing you mentioned the question of is this a horror movie? Is this a superhero movie? And I would say it's both, but I think really, if you break it down, it is more of a horror movie than a superhero movie. In fact, because it's a universal movie, I think this kind of makes the case that Darkman is a universal monster.
I will say that if Universal had not made it, I don't think even the studio would have bothered. I think
Yeah,
Universal during the '90s were hitting it with all these horror movies, and like, dude, they were out there just doing it because they made a lot of money off horror films, and they took a chance on this, which I'm glad for. You're absolutely right. I don't think if Sam Raimi had gone to any of the studio, this movie would have ever been made.
exactly. And I think that Sam knows this, and Sam knows the weight of classic horror behind this character. I mean, first of all, you've got in his first form, he basically looks like a mummy, and he shambles around after first of all, I find it hilarious that he somehow escapes from like the 15th floor window of this hospital, and nobody bothers to try to find him. Like, I mean, you'd think it'd be easy to find. All you have to do is, all right, let's put on an APB for a 6 foot mummy. You'd find him pretty soon. But like, he gets down and it's raining, and he finds a coat and a hat, which, according to the guys on the supplementals, is supposed to be the coat and the hat of an actor who played the Phantom of the Opera in like an old production of Phantom. So there's that already, that he had that Phantom of the Opera connection there already. But he's in this coat and he's in this outfit, but he's still bandaged up. And for whatever reason, he hasn't figured out how to talk again. So he sees Julie on the street, and we have a classic monster kind of moment where he's trying to talk to her, and all he can do is just be like, and that's pure Frankenstein. That moment. I mean, he's a lumbering Frankenstein, a creation of science,
But
a man with no face who cannot feel pain.
yeah,
And
but you bring up a great point. He is a Frankenstein monster. He's someone who's been experimented on by fucking doctors trying to further their own careers with new technology. You bring up some great points now.
yeah, you think about it, he is like almost every universal monster all rolled into one, except for the creature from the Black Lagoon. Because in a way, he's also the Invisible Man because nobody sees him.
So what he sees them.
He can appear and disappear at will, and he's kind of Dracula in the sense he's got the big cape, and he only can, and the sunlight can melt his skin.
Wow, that is a fucking insight there. You are absolutely right.
And he tries to befriend a cat when he goes to his secret lair, and the cat's like meow, and he's like bastard, because like animals apparently don't take kindly to monsters for the most part. You never see Frankenstein have a pet kitty or anything. But yeah, so he's definitely like every universal monster all rolled in one. By the way, I also kind of love Raimi's 2001 reference where he lights up. He's got all his stuff, and he calls his abandoned warehouse home. And he takes a little thing of rolled up newspaper and lights it and throws it. And we
Mhm.
follow this thing, this flaming torch rolling through the air, kind of like the bone gets thrown in the air through 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then goes into this big furnace and lights it up. So yeah, I mean, it's subtle, but knowing Sam Raimi, I'm sure that was meant to be a 2001 reference.
Yep, yep, yep.
But how cool is it though that he is able to, well, first of all, somehow all of his lab equipment from the laboratory explosion still works. It's scorched, but it still works. And he basically is creating what we would call today a 3D printer.
Yes.
If you think about it, this super advanced 1990 technology is really just 3D printing. And he tries to rebuild his own face, but he can't because part of the photo that he uses for reference to it is burned off. By the way, how amazing is it that this computer from 1990 is able to make a 3D image from a 2D image? I don't think you could do that very readily. I think that honestly, forget the whole like skin, artificial skin thing. He could have gone to freaking MIT with that and probably gotten enough funding for or a million artificial skins for freaking. That's one thing that bothers me sometimes about screenwriting is that screenwriters, we get this really cool science fiction idea, but then we realize, wait a minute, if you could do that, then you could also do this thing, which is actually a lot cooler. But like, he can take this tech, creates a 3D model, and he thinks he's so clever when he's typing it, and he's like, clever, quadrants, yes, and just types it in, and basically not only does it make a 3D image of his Liam Neeson head, but it reconstructs that part of his face that is disappeared by basically photoshopping.
Mm-hmm.
So not only, he just takes like the pixels from the one side of his face and puts it on the other, which that would work, I guess. But I do think it's funny that it takes like 5,000 hours for it to make that one face. Clearly his machine gets a lot better at it because he makes a lot more fake faces, and even fake faces that have tattoos in them, which I thought is interesting.
Well, yeah, with his face, it was missing pieces, and it had to create it. It had to create it, whereas the other people, he has a lot of photos for the reference. So I think that's why it takes so long for that one. It doesn't really make sense when it maybe makes a little sense, but when you start thinking about it too much.
Yeah. Another thing I think is really cool, as far as the effects in this movie that I never noticed until I watched it this last time. So his bandages kind of start to slowly fall off, and it also becomes pretty apparent as you watch the movie that he's having to change his bandages because he gets new ones towards the end of the movie. But like, they start to fall off on his hands, and there's this amazing scene where he burns the bandages off and takes them off and sees what his hands actually looks like and realizes that he can't feel them, and they're just like skeletons basically. And he has this big scene where he goes, "They took my hands. They took my hands." I don't know, and the camera pulls back, and you get the full feel the loneliness of him. I don't know what it is, but that scene gets me emotionally every time. But technically speaking, it's interesting because like the very next moment, we see him typing with a fully his one hand is like a reconstructed glove, and it looks just like a normal, and the other hand is his skeletal zombie looking hand. And I always thought that was a puppet, but I looked more closely. That hand is stop motion.
Well, he uses a lot of stop motion in the movie, so
I know, and I thought, oh wow, I never noticed there was a stop motion puppet all this time. I've seen this movie a billion times. I thought that was a puppet, like an actual like hand puppet, but nope, that thing was stop motion. I'm like, wow, that's super cool. Huh.
hey, Raimi loved to stop motion animation in his movies. So, although I don't think he still uses anything like that anymore, but he used it a lot in all of his earlier films. Until of course his shift to more dramatic thriller films. So,
Yeah, so he's making these masks, and what's cool about it though is that this is a revenge film, and it's a revenge film kind of in the tradition of a Machiavelli, of a Count of Monte Cristo. He's got a plan. He's gonna assume the identities of someone. Well, I mean, after he kills Rick, he gets some vital information about how Durant gets his money. There's a pickup and everything. By the way, a side note here, I discovered something that I didn't even pick up on. There's apparently a gay subplot in this movie, as you detected, because there is. So when Darkman's first, in order to get his, like you said, the pictures of everybody, he has to spy on all the criminal on Durant and his gang, and he takes all their pictures. One of the times he's taking pictures is he's seeing Durant and Rick at this big fancy schmancy function, and Durant comes in and says to Rick, "Would you like a cocktail?" And Rick's like, "I would love a cocktail." later on, after he kills Rick and assumes the identity of Tully or something, that big fat guy who looks like he looks like ugly Vin Diesel, and the other guys, gangsters, come in and go, man, where the hell is Rick? Robert is livid. He is on fire about where Rick is. I mean, I know he likes Rick and all. So there was, and so in the commentary, I believe the editor, the art director, said that basically the idea was supposed to be that Rick and Durant were lovers, and that Durant had this kind of lover, kind of mentee, mentor kind of relationship with Rick, and he gave Rick this golden gun, which Rick uses reluctantly to kill the kill Peyton's lab assistant, which, when they're walking away, he's like, good job, Rick. That was great. Right in the brainstem. That's what I would have done. So, and it kind of makes sense that, like, he's also jealous and mad when Darkman makes it look like Rick was going to go off with Tully.
That's interesting. I didn't notice that, but you're absolutely right.
So, and actually, it's kind of a missed opportunity if that is the case, because if that's the case, then it would have made Durant have like a personal vendetta against Darkman when he finds out later that no, he killed Rick and also made him think that Rick ran off with another man. So he should have been recklessly trying to annihilate him and get his revenge on Darkman for killing his Rick. But he doesn't really lean into that as much as I think they probably should have, because that's stakes. That's emotional stakes. He could have exploited that more dramatically, but they didn't. But nevertheless,
I think that warrants a rewatch of the second film, just to see how much the character changes, because that's actually a great point that you make about Durant, and seeing how much he goes after Darkman in the second film. So I actually now need to watch the second film, because you bring up a very interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of like that's there, because I mean, quite frankly, if you're gonna, I mean, I don't think like Durant is playing a gay stereotype. He's just a smart, sadistic, coldly psychopathic villain who may indeed be also LGBT. It's also implied that he's married, so he's having an affair with Rick, if that is the case. So I feel like, if you're going to be inclusive, that means having characters who may be LGBT as villains too. If you want to, if we want to be inclusive, then we as writers have to include them as heroes and villains. And you could do worse than Robert G. Durant, because he's a great villain.
He is. Larry Drake played the hell out of that character, I have to admit.
Oh yeah, he was coming hot off of L.A. Law, which his big thing was he was playing a mentally challenged. Maybe that character's a bit of a stereotype, but he was playing a mentally challenged character who I guess was very much beloved on L.A. Law. And they gave him this part, and I think the only reason why he got this part, aside from the fact that he really wanted to play him, is that Larry Drake just has one of those faces where it looks like he's made of putty. Like his nose, his eyes, everything. He just looks like his face is just kind of half made.
Well, he also did Dr. Giggles too, so.
Yes, that's right.
I can't remember when Dr. Giggles was released, but yeah, I know it was in the 90s at some point.
So and also, so I'm reminded as I'm remembering the scene where Darkman starts his plan of revenge and gets them to think that Rick ran off with the money they stole. He basically stole, which I guess Darkman took that money and used it for his lab. Now that I think about it. Because where is he going to get the money for all that equipment to maintain it and all that, and groceries? We didn't even think about that. But after he does that and gets Durant to basically kill his own henchman, I still wonder, even as I watch it again, what exactly was Darkman's plan? Because later on, he pretends to be Durant. And as Durant goes to some high-level meeting with some Chinese triad guys, I guess, and intimidates them with his no pain on the hand thing, to give them more money, to give Durant's organization more money. And then I guess he was going to leave. So, like, I'm not sure what he was planning to do there. Like, was he trying to piss off the triads so that they would kill Durant?
I think you're thinking too much into the movie.
I mean, but that's the thing, though. That's the thing about revenge plots. You know, there has to be like some intricacy to it. There has to be something that makes sense. But I mean, granted, they kind of discover him before he can do anything further with that mechanization. But it still caused me to wonder, like, what was Darkman's plan? Because you can, you know, your thing is you can turn yourself into any of these guys, and also apparently Darkman is like the greatest vocal mimic in the world.
Yeah.
So that was a hidden talent he didn't know he had, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I mean, it's a fun sequence where because Durant finds out, and then you have the two Durants. Which one is he? And the henchman's like, I don't know which one I shoot. And then he just smacks him. Then they do it. It's also great. By the way, also cool thing, if you look carefully, especially in the Blu-ray, you look carefully anytime Darkman has the artificial skin on, and if he's standing next to the person that he's pretending to be, you can tell the difference because Darkman's skin looks a little waxy. Like the makeup is so subtle, but it is there. You can tell.
Oh yeah.
Who's Dark. And you can definitely tell when we have the carnival scene in this movie, which is like basically the first date when he reveals himself to Frances McDormand, and she's like, "Oh, we gotta basically restart our relationship." And but he's giving her this kind of spiel about, "Oh, I have to be back at the doctor. I have to be back at the doctor. I'm not cured yet." So he thinks she's doing some kind of therapy, but he's vague about it. But although, now that I think about it, isn't it kind of stupid that he's having these dates with her in the middle of the day? Why can't he just go out with her at night when his mask will last longer than 90 minutes? But I don't know. I guess being burned to hell and like driven mad by rage doesn't make you think very, very effective. To think very effectively about things like that. But anyway, so he takes her to a carnival in the middle of the heat of the day, and they're going around, and it's the most Raimi-esque, I think, of all the sequences, because it's all about faces. It's all about the maniacal laughing faces of every human that he sees, with faces that he does not have. And it just gets, and the editing just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And he gets to a point where he's like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get you that elephant. I'm going to get you the biggest pink elephant I've ever, that's ever been. So he goes and does one of those stupid carny games where he's trying to throw and get the elephant. He's also a little disturbed by the freak show that's going on in the corner. Step right up, everybody, and come see the mutant lizard boy witness this cruel act of science. And they show this kid who looks like a Seattle grunge singer with lizard face. And honestly,
that's right.
And honestly, the makeup on Lizard Boy is pretty amazing. And apparently, it's the makeup artist on the movie that's who's playing Lizard Boy. And I kind of wish that Lizard Boy had become Darkman's sidekick, because that would have been amazing. Darkman and Lizard Boy coming to see.
God. He's not making Spy Kids here. We don't need.
Oh, come on. Anyway, so it's like he hits the thing, but the car, and he's like, "No, you weren't behind the line." And it's like, "Yes, I was behind the line." Like, "No, you weren't, buddy. Beat it. Give me my elephant." And then he just loses it, but because it's Sam Raimi, we see the world literally like like there's like lightning bolts of fire coming into the side of the frame. There's over cranking, under cranking of the film until finally he just freaking loses his mind. And this poor Carney makes the biggest mistake by putting his 2 fingers in his chest. And then Darkman just takes his fingers, cracks them all the way back around, and this wonderful Sam Raimi zoom in on his face going, ah! Carney's face going, ah, in pain, and Florence McDormand's face going, ah, in terror. And then he throws the guy across the like a doll, and the room collapses, and he grabs the elephant and goes, take the freaking elephant. And she is horrified, especially as his face starts to bubble and melt. And he runs away while the Carney's going, a freak! He's a freak! A freak! And by the time you're done with that, you're like, wow.
Well, keep in mind that, Sam Raimi's humor had not been established with most audiences at that time. If he had done it more like the Punisher superhero movie, I think it would have been more well received. But still, his humor is something that had not been, I guess, us cult enthusiasts who loved Evil Dead are as a small audience compared to the audience that Universal was hoping would enjoy Darkman.
Yeah, I feel like they underestimated just how much Raimi was willing to do to go far with his particular brand of film. Although I'm not sure if the Carney scene was particularly meant to be funny. I think it was meant to be just freaking insane. Mm-hmm. And I think he was like I think that he was trying to kind of dive into the twisted brain that is Peyton Westlake. Although I think that we probably get the most inside his crazy, deranged brain in my favorite scene where he's alone and he's just frustrated with the skin, and he starts talking to the cat and saying, "What are you looking? Huh? You think I'm some kind of circus freak? Huh? Maybe I should be wearing a funny little hat. See the dancing freak." He puts on a little tin hat on his head, and we see all these just flashes of images and twisted, canted angles, and there's strobe lights in the background that are red and just going lights that shouldn't be there at all. But oh my gosh, does it look incredible? So there's all those things that a regular filmmaker just wouldn't think to do. And it's really painfully apparent too when you see the sequels, just how little of that craziness should have been there in those two, because lesser directors made those.
Yeah. Yes, and we'll probably one day hopefully get around to discussing Darkman 2 and 3, because you gotta remember those sequels were kind of part of Raimi's forging ahead into producer territory, which is now what he's mostly known as. He's still producing a lot of successful horror movies now, even though he hasn't directed anything lately other than Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. He's been still producing horror movies that have still been extremely popular and profitable. So
yeah, for sure. So apparently also we're getting to the later half of this movie where Strax figures out what's going on. There was a lot of stuff that was also crazy in this movie that was cut that sadly is not on the Blu-ray. Bruce Campbell talks about his experience working on this movie in If Chins Could Kill, his autobiography. Mm-hmm. And he said that testing this movie was kind of interesting because test audiences unanimously said they hated one particular scene, and he called it the naked coin scene. So there was a scene cut from this movie where Strax is alone in his apartment, and you see him take out this chest full of rare coins, and the camera pulls back and you see that he is buck naked, and he takes these coins and spreads them all over the bedspread and rolls around on them, laughing and rolling in pleasure. And the whole idea of this scene is to show that he really loves money and is also a sick puppy. So but like test audiences were like, yeah, I didn't like the scene with the naked man. And I'm like, why did you not like the scene? And they said, it made me uncomfortable. And Bruce Campbell's like, well, it was supposed to make you uncomfortable. That was literally the whole point. Okay. So they cut it.
Well, we are getting to the end of our conversation on Darkman. Is there any final words you would like to tell everybody about the movie?
Excuse me. Well, there's so much more we could talk about on this thing. I mean, the helicopter chase sequence we briefly mentioned, where Durant's trying to destroy Darkman with a bazooka, and that they shot all that for real on a Sunday, which is cool because you wouldn't get away with that nowadays. I would say that, I guess, like you said before, this movie still has staying power, probably because the character is so iconic and leans back to the universal horror legacy, I suppose, and turns it into a superhero, basically. I love monsters and I love superheroes. Anytime you can combine them and make your monster a superhero, well, that's just a sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
I guess it's probably as evidenced by the fact that one of my favorite DC characters is Swamp Thing, who, if you think about it, is also a dead scientist who comes back to life as a superhero. It's just he's a plant instead of a guy with bandages who can assume any identity. And that aspect of Darkman's character, the fact that he could be anybody because he's no one, everywhere and nowhere,
Yeah.
leaves open to the fact that if you did it again today, you didn't need Liam Neeson to come back, because the original plan was like each Darkman movie he'd be a different actor, and they were going to have it be Darkman 2 is going to be Bruce Campbell as Darkman. So like whenever, and it would make sense too that at the end of the movie, after he's killed Strax and saved Frances McDormand, he's like, Peyton is gone, and then he puts on the last mask and voila, it's Bruce Campbell. So
Very young Bruce Campbell, by the way.
Very young, handsome, prime Bruce Campbell. Man, can you imagine how cool it would have been if Darkman 2 was Bruce Campbell as Darkman?
Yeah.
It would have been great. But what's also great, what would have been great, is if Arnold Schwarzenegger had played Darkman. And the final scene where he's got Strax hanging over the edge and he's holding his foot, which, by the way, there's no real reason why he should be holding his foot, because there's no real motivation for him to do that. He should just let him fall. But instead, it becomes this kind of linchpin moment where, and that's the thing I love about this movie, we ain't going to talk about it much, is how it doesn't homogenize the character. He does become a monster on the inside. Revenge does drive him to become this sadistic murderer, basically, and he knows it. And so Strax is telling him, "Hey, if you drop me, you'll regret it. You'll become like me, and then you'll not live with yourself." And in the original, he drops him and says, "I'm learning to live with a lot of things." But now I wonder if Schwarzenegger had said it, he might have said it kind of like this. Strack, I think you're right. I think you need a vacation from life.
So
number two. I got two more of these, brother, and they're funny. I swear. Hey, Strack, I think your stock is falling. You better catch it. Number three. You know what, Strack? I hear they got a new opening for a new CEO in hell.
I like the second one the most.
Your stock is falling. You better catch it.
I like that one. That one's good. Are we going to do our ratings for the movie?
Absolutely.
When it's just us, it's good that we do the ratings.
Absolutely. I think the one object for me that defines this movie um, is in the carnival scene when he's running away from Julie, and Julie's like, "Where'd he go? Where'd he go?" And she looks on the ground and sees the melted Liam Neeson face mask that just kind of disintegrates before her eyes. Because I feel like that melting face mask is like the center of Peyton's the bane of his existence, that he can't get it to work past 90 minutes. But it's also the thing that he uses to assume the identity of anyone he wishes as Darkman. So for me, this movie is 3.5 melted faces out of 5. The script could have used a little bit more work. I mean, we didn't even get into the fact that this movie was a fight, a war between Sam in post production, the edit room, between Sam Raimi and the studio, and some of those problems that I see in the script probably could have been smoothed out, and if they had more time for the edit. But as it stands, basically what they did apparently was they literally stole the movie from Universal, went to their own personal edit bay, and cut it themselves in a day.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So God bless, Sam Raimi and the editor for doing things the drive-in way.
Yeah.
So
So
3.5 melted faces out of 5. Kevin, what would you rate Darkman?
you know what? After our conversation, I'm going to have to agree with you. The first time so far, 3.5 melted faces. I believe that you are absolutely correct because you made me see some things that I had not noticed before. And so, if I was my 1990s Kevin, I probably would have given it 5 melted faces. But because me and you had our conversation, and it's like 25 years or 30 years later, I believe 3.5, because I would love to see them reattempt this story. I think they could do a much better job with all the holes and problems that they had with it. And Sam Raimi's at a point in his career where he can get fucking anything done if he wants to.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting. So yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you on this one. 3.5 melted faces. Mask.
and apparently they did try to make a TV show out of Darkman. There is a pilot, or in the very least a sizzle for a pilot out there, according to Larry Drake on the supplementals. He saw it, but very few people have. But apparently it wasn't good enough for the network to be like, yeah, let's make a pilot out of this. So if any of y'all out there work in the industry and you're listening to this show, Conversations in Horror, reach out to us through our Facebook page and other social media if you have access to the lost pilot or pilot sizzle of Darkman, the TV show. We want to see it. Please help us.
And with that, I want to thank you, Thomas, for coming out for Conversations in Horror. And I will agree with him yet again that we would all love to see that. So, any of you listening out there, please let us know. Thank you all for joining us on Conversations in Horror. We hope that you will check out some of our previous episodes and check out in our social media sites, and make sure to subscribe because we don't want you to miss a single episode that's coming up. Thank you all and have a good day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, produced by Kevin L. Powers, executive produced by Kelly A. Inoka, and originally filmed via Zoom technology. Conversations in Horror is hosted by Kevin L. Powers and co-hosted by various horror film lovers and filmmakers. To learn more about Mr. Powers, please make sure to check out his Patreon page and other social media platforms. Conversations in Horror is copyright 2024 Broken Lighthouse Pictures production.